സോ നമ്മുടെ ടോപ്പിക് എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ എക്കണോമിക് ഡെവലപ്മെൻറ്റ് സ്ട്രാറ്റജീസ് സിൻസ് ഇൻഡിപെൻഡൻസ് ആണ്. ഇതിൽ ഞാൻ എടുക്കാൻ പോകുന്നത് ഇൻട്രൊഡക്ഷൻ ആണ്. അപ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് ഇൻട്രൊഡക്ഷൻ നോക്കാം. The economic reforms refer to the process in which the government prescribes declining role for the state and expanding role for the private sector in an economy. In India has several industries policies followed before 1991 and they were all effective to an extent. India adopted new economic policies in 1991. The immediate factor that triggered India's economic reform of 1991 was severe balance of payment crisis that occurred in the same year, and the early policies of public sector expansion create an inefficient public sector. A system of licensing and controlling result in hindering investment by private sector and also discourage foreign investment into the country. Balance of payment crisis in 90s, foreign exchange reserve depleted. Then the government of India approaches IMF to borrow funds and the IMF recommended the government to adopt NEP.
My topic is macroeconomic reforms implemented since 1991. I'm going to talk about NEP 1991 and one of the three concepts, liberalization. The new economic policy of 1991. The new economic policy NEP of India was launched in the year 1991. It was implemented in July 1991 under the leadership of P.V. Narasimha Rao. The new economic policy was undertaken by the then Finance Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. This policy is popularly known as LPG, Liberalization, Privatization and Globalization. NEP was implemented with the goal of making the economy more market and service oriented and expanding the role of private and foreign investment. NEP is a set of policy measures that emphasized liberalization, privatization, and its outcome was globalization. It included various policy measures such as stabilization measures and various structural reform measures. New economic policy was undertaken in view of the 1991 financial crisis that arose due to reasons like the Gulf War that pushed up oil prices and lower remittance from the Gulf, foreign reserves at an all-time low, hyperinflation occurring at the same time. India's foreign exchange reserves depleted and India approached IMF for a fund. But IMF directed India to adopt a new economic policy. India agreed to the conditions of the World Bank and IMF and announced the new economic policy. What are the objectives of NEP? The following are the objectives of NEP: to make the entry of the Indian economy into the field of globalization and to give it a new thrust on market orientation. NEP was envisioned to bring down the rate of inflation and to increase the economic growth rate and build significant foreign exchange reserves. Another one was to enable economic stability and to remove market restrictions and other impediments to growth. Uh, it was implemented to increase the inflow of international goods, services, capital, human resource, and technology by removing restrictions. And sectors reserved for the government were reduced so as to increase the participation of private players in various sectors of the economy. What is liberalization? The rules, liberalization was one of the concepts in LPG. Liberalization means the rules and laws aimed at regulating the economic activities became major hindrance in the growth and development. India had followed some economic regulations before 1991. The main aim of liberalization was to remove unnecessary shackles on the freedom of setting up enterprises. The country during the first 3 decades of development had created a license permit Raj, the rule of the bureaucracy to grant a license to start an undertaking. If big business houses intended to set up a new enterprise, their applications were sent for the scrutiny of the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Commission. There was a need to review this. The government considered the ceiling limit as irrelevant and a hindrance to investment in the context of the new wave of liberalization. There are two purposes for the implementation of liberalization. One for to unlock the economic potential of the country, and two, the second one was to introduce much more competition into the economy and creating incentive, increasing efficiency of operations. The industrial policy of 1991 abolished industrial licensing for all projects except a small list of 18 industries. What are the steps undertaken through liberalization? First one, reforms of the public sector. The reform processes has undertaken several measures with respect to the public sector. The major measures are: the areas of public sector will be restricted to strategic, high-tech and essential infrastructure. Some of the areas hitherto reserved for the public sector will be opened for the entry of private sectors. Public sector enterprises which are chronically sick will be referred to board for industrial and financial reconstruction. In the case the board declares them non-viable, they will be wound up. But in case the board advises that there will be a possibility of their revival, then revival or rehabilitation schemes will be implemented. In any case, workers rendered surplus will be provided itself by a social security mechanism. To improve efficiency and link the interests of workers, a part of the share will be offered to the workers. Second one, the commercial banks were given the freedom to determine interest rates. Previously, the Reserve Bank of India had the authority to determine the interest rates. The investment limit for small scale industries were raised to 1 crore. Industries are now free to decide their production capacity and reduce production costs based on public market requirements. Abolition of restrictive trade practices also was done under the liberalization. Previously, companies with assets worth more than rupees 100 crore were classified as MRTP firms and were subjected to severe restrictions. They were all lifted. Indian industries were given the freedom to import capital goods like machinery and raw materials from foreign countries. Industrial licensing and registration were removed. As per this, the private sector is free to start a new venture of business without obtaining licenses except for the following sectors. They are cigarette, liquor, industrial explosives, defense equipments, hazardous chemicals, and drugs. What are the benefits of liberalization? Liberalization brought so many benefits to our Indian economy, and a few among them are: liberalization ushered in the free inflow of capital in the country by enabling business to access the same from investors. It enabled a diversification of investors' portfolios, which helped in increasing profit among businesses. Decreasing the economic regulations led to an increase in the stock market values, thus resulting in better trading among investors. It improved the agriculture sector by resulting in greater investments, diversification of cropping patterns, etc. And finally, the limitations of liberalization. Even though liberalization was put forward for the improvement of the economy, it also has some limitations. It caused economic destabilization due to radical reforms introduced in political and economic domains. Increased competition from large multinationals threatened the existence of several smaller firms. Removal of restrictions from sectors like banking and insurance led to a downfall in the government's stake in both these sectors. Increased potential for mergers and acquisition posed a threat to the employees of smaller firms. And that's all my topic. Thank you.